Gay bashing is something no one should ever fall prey to. But unfortunately, on the 7th of July of 1984, Charlie Howard lost his life due to gay bashing. Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, and today we're going to be discussing the horrific death, the gay bashing death of Charlie Howard. Now, not a lot of people probably have heard of Charlie Howard unless you have watched it and kind of put two and two together. Charlie Howard's death inspired a scene in it, but we'll get into that at the end, towards the end of this video. So originally Charlie Howard was from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, but he did move to Ellsworth, Maine. And this was after he finished high school. He knew that college wasn't for him, so he moved to Ellsworth, Maine. And while he was there, he did go into a relationship with another man, but unfortunately that relationship ended. And when it ended, this is when he made his way to Bangor, Maine. Now, during my research of this crime, I stumbled upon another video of another true crime channel that covered this. And I do understand people from different parts of the country don't understand the way things are pronounced, but Bangor is pronounced Bangor, not Bangor. So if you are not aware with New England and how we speak, we do have a very thick accent and things are pronounced in different ways. So I am able to turn mine off because of living in two different states in New England, so that's why it doesn't really come to the forefront. But Bangor is pronounced Bangor, not Bangor. So in Bangor, Maine is where he moved to, and this happened in January of 1984. So after he's in Bangor, he doesn't really get anywhere at first. He is eventually befriended by two men, Scott Hamilton and Paul Nodden, and they let Charlie live with them so he can get on his feet. But after about a month he's living with them, they notice that nothing's really changing about Charlie. He's still depressed, he's still unsure about who he is, and they tell him maybe it's a good idea to move back home, to move back to Portsmouth. Well, he moves back in with his mother and his stepfather in Portsmouth, and he immediately knows that he's not wanted there. He doesn't feel welcome there. So he ends up moving back to Bangor. So he moves back to Bangor after he phones his friends and tells them that nothing's right, nothing doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right here. Nothing is going the way that it should. And Charlie's life is at a standstill. So he ends up going back to Bangor and moving back in with Scott and Paul. Well, when he returns, they notice that something is different about him. His spirits are lifted. He is absolutely determined to change his life. And by this time that he moves back to Bangor, he's already had multiple failed relationships. So he really wants to find somebody that he can have as a companion to be around him. And he's not necessarily fully depressed at this time, but he definitely feels more down and out when it comes to his life. That, and with people not really understanding him. Charlie was a very I'm gonna let my freak flag fly type of person. So after he goes back to Bangor, he ends up joining a church, the local Unitarian church. Now it's actually called the Brick Church, but he joins the church and he also goes to a support group called Interweave. Now it's here where Charlie makes more new friends and he finally feels free to be open and to be who he is. And Charlie finally feels able to be himself. Now, he also finds an apartment on First Street in Bangor, which is right near the church that he joins, and he also adopts a kitten as well. Charlie was very out with his sexuality, which was not really a thing at this time. There were still a lot of closeted gay men in the United States. In the United States and in the entire world. A lot of people were afraid to come out because obviously this is around in the 80s is basically the time in which AIDS was really becoming a prevalent thing. People were afraid to come out as being gay because they didn't know how people were going to react to them coming out. You know what I mean? So he was very, very ostentatious. He was very flamboyant. He was happy to be himself. He wore makeup. He wore jewelry. He carried purses. Like, he was very well known for flaunting his sexuality. Well, not like flaunting his sexuality, but being open about his sexuality and flaunting how flamboyant he was, because that's who he was. Now, some people didn't like how he did that, and they also said that he was sissying it up. That's what a lot of people referred to him in his very avant-garde nature of the way that he dressed. They referred it as sissying. Charlie was also known for singing his favorite song. Now, his favorite song is I Am What I Am from La Cage Follies. Now, this also becomes a prominent thing too at the end of this video, so please stay tuned. So, like I already said, in 1984, a lot of people were not used to or coming to terms with men coming out with their sexuality. A lot of people didn't tolerate homosexuals as well. Gay bashing was happening, and most of these incidents were never reported if a gay bashing incident happened. Now, Charlie also was tormented in high school, and he was tormented after moving to Bangor for being gay, and he was tormented by high school boys that went to Bangor High. There is a time in which he went to a local club in Bangor and he was dancing with another man. The bouncer of the club went up to Charlie and told him he needed to leave because his actions were inappropriate, just for dancing with a man he was interested in. There was also another time where Charlie was publicly accosted by a woman, and she yelled, "You queer, you pervert," at him. Now, he first was starting to walk away to get away from this, and then he stopped. He turned back and blew a kiss at the woman, because that's how he would deal with these things. He would endure it, and then he would stop and look back on it. Now, for me, thinking about it, it serves her right after this interaction that Charlie stopped and blew a kiss at her. Yes, she probably felt super offended by it, but how offended did Charlie feel for you publicly accosting him in a grocery store? So it's after this interaction with this woman, he becomes very, more wary with strangers. There was also a day when he was leaving his apartment where unfortunately he found his newly adopted kitten dead on his doorstep. His kitten was killed via strangulation. Charlie was absolutely devastated because he adopted a kitten to have somebody with him, like a comfort animal, kind of like an emotional support animal. And now somebody that is tormenting him has killed his kitten. Like, how fucked do you have to be to do that to some random person that isn't doing anything to you? So, on the 7th of July of 1984, Charlie ends up attending a potluck dinner at Interweave with his boyfriend, Roy Ogden. Now, they left at about 10 p.m. that evening, and they decided to walk to the post office so Charlie could get his mail. Now, after they start on their way, they continue down State Street, and then they go over the Candlestick River Bridge. This is when he notices a car full of teenagers, and that the car specifically starts to slow down. These teens just left a party and were out trying to get more alcohol. Well, there was 3 boys in the car: Sean Mabry, Jim Baines, and David Ness, and along with 2 girls, and the girls stay in the vehicle. Now, the boys come up to Charlie and Roy and ask them, "Are you gay?" And then they decide to chase them down on foot, because, here's already a hostile interaction. This freaks out Roy and Charlie, so they decide to run away. Well, Charlie has asthma, and when he begins to run away, obviously he's in panic mode. Your breathing is going to start to increase, and it kicks off a asthma attack. He also, right before the start of his asthma attack, realizes that vehicle he recognized from an earlier incident that had happened. So he had already been in contact with these boys in that vehicle in a prior incident to what was currently happening. Now, he couldn't catch his breath at all during his asthma attack, which, if you've ever had one, is something that happens. You need your inhaler to help you breathe. Now, Charlie, has to stop. He falls and he stops with his asthma attack, and Roy keeps running. Roy runs until he feels it's safe to stop and hide, and he just continues down State Street. What he didn't realize is he was going to watch the events that take place in what would lead up to his boyfriend's death. So the three boys, when they catch up to Charlie, they start beating him. And Jim Baines shouts, "We should just throw him over the bridge." And then they proceeded to grab him by his legs. Jim Baines and Daniel Ness then start lifting him over the side of the bridge as Charlie is pleading for his life to not kill him. Charlie then grabs a railing and continues to beg, "Please don't kill me, please don't kill me, I can't swim." They then pry his fingers off, and Sean Mabry pushes him off the bridge. Charlie then falls into the water below. The boys then retreat back to the car where the girls are. They start the car. And as they make their way down State Street, this is when they spot Roy Ogden. And the boys get out of the car and they threaten Roy Ogden if he tells anybody that they're going to physically hurt him. And then they flee the scene. Roy waits until they leave, until he feels it's right. He then runs for help, but he ends up finding a first fire alarm, and he pulls the alarm as he stumbles down State Street. Roy waited, and eventually he would hear sirens coming, and the sirens were filling the air, and he knew that help was here, but they didn't know that they were too late. So they searched for Charlie in the Kenduskeag River, but at around 1 a.m., they pull his body out of the river. His autopsy revealed that he died from drowning and suffered from a severe asthma attack. Charlie was only 23 years old when he died. Now, the boys who killed Charlie, they returned to the same party that they left from, and they ended up bragging about killing him. They even went on to say that the bridge is now Chuck-a-Homo Bridge. That's what they nicknamed it, because they chucked a homo off of it. The next day, one of the boys decided to turn himself in on July 8th. The other boys, however, decided that they needed to leave town on a freight train, but once they got on the train, something finally clicked and told them that they needed to stop and turn themselves in. So that's what they did. And they returned home, and they were subsequently arrested. So Daniel Ness was 17, Sean Mabry was 16, and Jim Baines was 15. They were all originally charged with murder. However, the charges were reduced to manslaughter because they felt it was necessary to try them as juveniles rather than adults. I think that's fucking bullshit. You guys decided to chuck a boy off of a bridge after you repeatedly beat him and were gay bashing him. No, that's malicious intent. Malicious intent is murder, not manslaughter. Also, don't get too upset about what I will tell you about their sentencing, because man, did I get super flustered by this, just saying. So, on October 1st, 1984, they were sentenced to Maine Youth Center. All of these boys were set free by the time they turned 21. Jim Baines served 2 years, and Sean Mabry served 22 months. So basically what happened is they were found guilty, but they could only stay in the youth center until they turned 21, and after that they were released. I think that's fucking bullshit. They should have stayed in jail for longer, for rehabilitation. So Charlie was buried in Kittery in Orchard Grove Cemetery, and he doesn't have a marker on his grave, and this is to save him from being further bullied after his death. It was his family's choice to not have a stone, which I agree with. Now, about 25 years after the death of Charlie, the Bangor Daily News tried to locate Sean Mabry, Jim Baines, and David Ness. Now, at this time, they would be middle-aged, and they wanted to see how they felt about their actions in the murder. Now, they were only really able to locate Jim Baines, who still lived in Bangor, and he lived there following his release from the Maine Youth Center. Now, after he was released, he started speaking about tolerance when it comes to specific groups of people, and he also addressed the Maine State Legislature when it came to supporting a bill that bans any type of physical violence or discrimination due to sexuality and sexual orientation. He also co-wrote a book called Penitence with Ed Armstrong in 1994. And this book is about his conversion from once being a queer basher or a gay basher to now being a supporter of the LGBTQIA plus community. Now, eventually they did speak to Sean Mabry, and he talked about how he absolutely regretted his involvement in Charlie's death and how he thinks about Charlie every day. Now, standing today is a memorial within walking distance from where he was pushed off the bridge and died. It's an engraved stone that says, "May we, the citizens of Bangor, continue to change the world around us until hatred becomes peacemaking and ignorance becomes understanding." Now, also what is good is that July 7th in Bangor is Diversity Day, and this is a day to remember Charlie Howard, because his legacy and his death has stayed with not just Bangor, but also with Portsmouth as well. Now, unfortunately, his memorial has been vandalized and it was covered in anti-gay slurs and graffiti, but his family and his friends decided to clean it, and they ultimately rededicated it to Charlie in his honor. In 2021, there was a stone bench that was installed in the commercial gallery in Portsmouth, and it has the inscription of the song "I Am What I Am" from La Cage aux Folles, which is Charlie's favorite song. Now, like I told you in the beginning, there is an adaptation of Charlie Howard's murder in a movie. Now, his murder was the inspiration for the death of Adrian Millen in It Chapter 2. So, in the opening scene, there is a gay man, a gay teenager, that is pushed off of a bridge by other teenage boys. Now, this scene is basically reflecting on Charlie Howard's murder and him being thrown into the Kendiskeg River. Now, Stephen King lived in Bangor, Maine at the time that his murder happened. Hence why he added in these details, because it's not just talking about Derry, Maine, or like Derry. Derry is based on, or loosely based on, different towns and cities in New England. But there are certain things in history that happened in New England history, of which Charlie's murder, that Stephen King wanted to reflect on in it. So this becoming something of the limelight is how Charlie's murder has become more popularized. There is not a lot of videos on YouTube that talk about his murder, which they should. His murder is very important when it comes to the diversity of this country and understanding that it's okay to be you and it's okay to not be afraid to be you, which he wasn't afraid to be himself. And unfortunately, just 3 teenage boys decided to destroy his life and kill him because they were not okay with how he was. It's not right for people to take away somebody else's life just because they don't agree with it. Charlie's murder, like I said, touched Bangor in a way that they never will really overcome his death. Every year on the anniversary of his death, they reflect on his memory and they throw flowers off the Kendiskeg Bridge and it goes into the river. Now, Portsmouth also does the same thing. They throw white roses into the Piscataqua River off of Memorial Bridge every year on the anniversary of Charlie Howard's death. So the symbolism of the flowers being thrown into the water is to regret his death and to have respect for the loss of Charlie. So that, my friends, I hope is the death of Charlie Howard. And I hope you guys really listen to what this death was really about, because this young man did not deserve to lose his life because he was being himself. He did not deserve to lose himself to 3 people that didn't understand him. This one is very saddening because I myself, growing up in New England, you don't hear about a lot of stuff like this. Like, we typically just hear about Lizzie Borden because she's in Massachusetts, or H.H. Holmes because he's from New Hampshire. We don't hear about cases like Charlie Howard. We don't hear about hate crimes like this. So I wanted to include this because it's not only close to home for me, but because how important it is for Pride Month. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you stick around, subscribe, turn your bell notification on all. That way you know whenever I upload. And I will see you guys in another video.